In the year 2000, Marvel wanted to find a way to reach a younger audience, so they rebooted Spider-Man with the Ultimate Spider-Man comic book line. And 2 years later, in 2002, Spider-Man the movie was released into theaters, which of course was accompanied by a movie tie-in game. It was by no means an open-world game, and it did not feature the trademark swinging physics due to technical limitations at the time. But that all changed 2 years later when Spider-Man 2 the movie, as well as the game, was released. With a new physics engine and an open world, you could finally swing around Manhattan and feel what it felt like to be Spider-Man. This brings us to 2005. The Ultimate Spider-Man, the video game. I hadn't played this game since I was a little lad, so I figured it was time to play this on stream. And what I was met with was something that was crazy. This is by far the most stylish Spider-Man game, and by far the closest thing that is as stylish as Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. It seems to have gone under a lot of people's radars, so this video is to help introduce some people to it. With the art style that this game has, I really think that it is a timeless game. You would never think that it's 16, almost 17 years old. And I really do firmly believe that this game either deserves a remake, a sequel, or a Miles Morales game that takes place within this universe, since this is his universe. This is actually going to be my first review video, so, cut your boy some slack on the format and the style, you know what I mean? Let me know how you guys think about it, and if you guys like it, give it a thumbs up, or sub if you aren't already subbed. Much love, guys. Enjoy. Side note, I actually own the CD still. I didn't install it with CD, because I don't have a CD drive in my computer. But, yeah, I thought it was kind of funny, because I also had the Sam Raimi games in there. I wonder if they still work. Man, I'm old.
This is how it all began. Which, of course, leads to nonsense like this.
From the moment the game starts, we're introduced with the stylistic, comic-like cutscenes. They are absolutely fucking awesome. I don't know how else to say it, but they are amazing. You don't really get cel shading like this anymore. Games like Wind Waker, Jet Set Radio Future, 13, Freedom Force, Okami, and Ultimate Spider-Man. This type of cel shading isn't really seen much anymore. I'm not really sure why. The only popular game that I can think of in recent memory that has this type of style is Telltale's, actually, which I'm not actually a big fan of, but the Telltale games do cel shading pretty well. This is a personal opinion, but this cel shading style definitely invokes a comic book more than any other style that I've ever seen. The way that the frames go from one side of the screen to the other, just like the overall movements and how they'll sometimes have an image in the background. I think it helps the viewer almost feel a sense of their eyes going from one panel to another. To better articulate what I mean, when you're reading a comic, you start at the top of the page and read from left to right, and then the next panel is below it, left to right. So you get the same form of structure from left to right as the videos progress and the storytelling goes on. One thing to note is that I'm not a huge Ultimate Spider-Man story fan. I grew up with the 90s TV shows, so I was more accustomed to the Amazing Spider-Man kind of storyline. The Ultimate story took Peter and made him a lot younger. It's kind of funny because the Amazing Spider-Man movies are totally based off of the Ultimate story. And it's not that I hate the Ultimate storyline, I dislike character design retcons. I don't really dislike how the characters look, I just don't like the fact that they're supposed to be the same characters. Like making Rhino a guy in a robotic suit, or Green Goblin just this Hulk. Nah. Spider-Man was going through a time period where he didn't even know what he wanted to be. And going through that transition of trying to bring Spider-Man into the current age, I feel kind of started off with the Spider-Man Unlimited TV show. They were how do we bring Spider-Man into the future? Put him in the future. 8 to 11-year-old GB was just this shit is fucking awesome, oh my god, look at it, Spider-Man's in the future, oh my god. to then only like a year later being like, let's just fucking start all over, which is where the ultimate story comes from. I don't hate the whole story, but the origin of Peter Parker is slightly different. His parents are a little bit more involved in this one.
A few months ago, I reunited with my childhood friend Eddie Brock. What is that? It's our inheritance. Eddie's dad and my dad worked together before they died.
We believe the suit may be the final step. Finally, a cure for cancer. People are dying all over the world. All I want to do is try to help them. But because I signed the wrong paper for the wrong person.
Like in the Amazing Spider-Man movies, I didn't like that. That's taken from the Ultimate Universe, like of Peter's parents being like this big mystery or this big thing of his past. I hate that shit, man. I fucking despise that. And him and Eddie are, of course, childhood friends, with their parents having made the Venom suit. I'm just not too inclined to the idea of Peter and Eddie knowing each other from childhood and their parents working together at somewhere. Like, I don't like the connection between Peter and Venom being like a childhood friendship thing. I just don't like it. Or like Flash Thompson becoming Venom and then being nice with Peter. It's like, I'm way more used to Eddie being more like,
thought it was over, didn't you, Spider-Man? You made a fool of Eddie Brock whenever you could. You cost me my job, my reputation, my health, my apartment. You just won't stop till you ruin me, will you? You can't do this.
I already have.
You're fired. I'll get even with you if it's the last thing I do. Rejected the symbiote. Only wanted to make you stronger. Well, surprise, surprise. Now, we're one. Now, you're gonna pay. From now on, we're poison to you, Spider-Man. That's why we call ourselves Venom.
One cool thing about this game is that it's not just a Spider-Man game. You do actually get to play as Venom as well. The story does rotate between the two characters, and that's like something that's pretty dope to see in a game. Just like the rotation between the good guy and the bad guy, and it's cool because they actually do have different playstyle mechanics. And I actually do really like that. Spider-Man has his traditional playstyle, and by that I mean you jump around and hit the shit out of people and web them up. Of course, your main mode of transportation is web swinging, all that good jazz. And then on the other side you have Venom. You got like your tentacles and you whack people with your tentacles. You consume them. And with Venom, your main mode of transportation is jumping. The closest thing that I could compare this to would be the Hulk jumping around. One thing about Venom that's pretty funny though is during his storyline, when you first have to do the consume feature, like to gain back health, the first thing that you consume is a little kid holding a balloon. And of course, any rational person is just like, wait, do I have to eat the kid? I do have to eat the kid. Yeah, that's gonna be your first consumption. You're just gonna fucking kill him. Let's talk about the swinging specifically for a second. So when you shoot out a web, it does attach to a building, and you do swing with the trajectory of attaching yourself to the building in which your web shot out and attached to. And this isn't something that's in every Spider-Man game. Like in the Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2, and Web of Shadows, in the original Spider-Man game, your webs didn't attach to buildings. They just went up into heaven. So this is a huge plus always to see, especially from a game that came out in 2005. Like, remember, the core Spider-Man mechanics from Spider-Man 2 had only come out a year prior. So physics weight, swinging with a trajectory like this, with physics involved, was a mind-blowing thing to see at the time, and is still really cool to see going back and revisiting this game, because you know in your mind this game is more than 10 years old. The swinging system itself actually feels pretty good. Sometimes it might feel a little sluggish because of like the momentum of the swings, but I think that overall, it still does convey swinging as Spider-Man. Meanwhile, we have a game like The Avengers, and they couldn't even get it right. And this is 2021. And I look at this and I'm just like, damn man, like what is up with this? How does this get through? There are better fan-made like demos with better swinging. Now the combat itself, it's a little dated. The gameplay is essentially beat 'em up. You hit your button, you attack them, you kind of run away from the attacks, but there's no actual like dodging or like parrying or anything like that. Like in the newer Spider-Man, how it kind of has like the Batman Arkham Asylum kind of gameplay with the parrying. Doesn't have any of that. Nor are there any abilities besides like shooting webs for Spider-Man and like consumption for Venom. Also, the comic book effects are still present in the combat. Similar to like Into the Spider-Verse, when anyone hits somebody in that movie, you'll just see like that little animation. I just think that goes back to like how stylish this game is. Kind of like how stylish Into the Spider-Verse is. It's just like stylish as fuck. It looks like a comic, acts like a comic, you know, it's awesome. This game could come out today, and if they had better mechanics for the combat, it would still be a great game. It would still be like a really cool Spider-Man game that people would love to play. So regardless of how good the mechanics actually are, I still really enjoy this game's combat. And the fact that it lets you play as two separate characters, one being the good guy, one being like the anti-hero or the bad guy, I like that. I like when games do that. And this isn't even to mention everybody else that appears during the story. Silver Sable's in this game, Beetle's in this game, Electro, Green Goblin, Shocker, Mary Jane, Nick Fury, Wolverine, Johnny Storm, Carnage, and the amount of people that are mentioned is crazy. Like, so many characters are mentioned in this game, which lets you know that there's a larger universe out there, you know what I mean? It establishes well that there is a larger universe that Peter is a part of. Another thing I definitely want to touch on is the map. This is like one of the few Spider-Man games that has outside of Manhattan. And when I say that, I mean it has Queens, which is great to see because Spider-Man is from Queens. Now, I don't know if game creators or just people in general don't know this, but there is more than just Manhattan in New York City. There's Staten Island, there's Brooklyn, there's the Bronx, and of course Queens. Queens is like a little bit lower, height-wise, I guess you could say, from Manhattan. It's very suburban, and the buildings are no more than 6 stories. Not all of them, but it really reminds you that, like, Spider-Man is a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. You know what I mean? This just helps contribute to how large of a scale the world is, right? So instead of just having Manhattan, you have Manhattan and another borough, which makes the city seem larger. The GTA Definitive Edition, for example, removed clouds from San Andreas. Removing clouds from San Andreas made the world seem smaller, even though it actually wasn't. It's the same thing with having another borough over a bridge in this game. It makes the world just seem larger, and it makes the city seem more like the city, since it has another borough. And this helps with making Peter feel like he's more from New York City, because he's not from Manhattan. He like visits Manhattan, he goes to Manhattan, right? When Spider-Man is this young, remember, so he is in Queens, right? And so he's living with Aunt May in a suburban area. So in schools that are in the city, you don't really have football fields, but in schools that are more in like the outskirts of the city, in the boroughs, you do get high schools that do have football fields, right? So it's cool to see that, because the very first time that you ever take control of Peter, it's against Venom on your high school football field. I love that type of stuff. A core part of the Spider-Man character is that he is just a kid from Queens. Like,
people see me and think they're safer, but it's not really me they're seeing. Probably for the best. Knowing everything hinges on a guy from Queens sounds as scary as it feels.
you get to see him in a different neighborhood, and you get to play as him in his home neighborhood. And being able to go from there to Manhattan, that is a really cool part of this game. I haven't seen that in another Spider-Man game ever, and yeah, I just really appreciate having another borough besides Manhattan. Because I'm from the Bronx, so you already know. We literally never get repped in anything. Literally, it's like...
Where you from?
Queens?
Brooklyn.
Not from the Bronx.
Literally, this is one of my few mascots.
I like people that, like, you know, sell drugs, scam,
I like the gangster.
Now, one thing I have to bring up is the progression. You have to do some of the side quests, or the side races, or events, saving civilians, or so forth, in order to be able to do the next mission. I think that it is a good way of actually making you play as Spider-Man, like having to go save some civilians or stop a robbery or something like that, while like also kind of artificially increasing the length of the game, since it is a fairly short title. But so many games do this nowadays, just in general, of like creating these barriers in order to progress the story. Assassin's Creed being the one that I'm thinking of the most. To be clear, I don't agree with every game having like overbloated side content. I think that there are certain games that it can work with and certain games that it definitely does not work with. Like in the Arkham series, finding all the Riddler tokens, I think this is a beneficial case, right? But it's not mandated and you don't have to do it, but it's kind of a cool addition to the game that adds characters as well as adds like event, some bloat to extend the playthrough of the game. And in Ultimate Spider-Man, it works well. Even though it's mandatory, these are still events that you could see yourself as Spider-Man doing. These type of events can actually be really cool and also add characters to the story using like side content. I think it's a really good way of doing so. For example, Johnny Storm is introduced in this game through the races, because you have to race him through the city. And it's just a really good way of introducing him as well as creating more content for the game that is simple but also contributes to the character and world building. But in Assassin's Creed, having to take over every single village, it doesn't really help the story that much. Like river raids. Who the hell does river raids in Assassin's Creed? Nobody likes doing the river raids because they're so monotonous. Now in terms of like the texturing of the game is actually not like extremely good. Of course, you know, the game came out in 2005, so you can't really blame the textures, but it actually does a really good job of making the game feel very flat and like a comic book. I think that these type of graphics really do not age poorly. It might be because of my nostalgia, because
I think it's got like a really cool style to it. It looks old to me for some reason. Because it is, okay? Look at these idle animations. Too many taxis. What do you mean too many taxis? It's it's New York City.
I might not even sometimes realize something when I'm looking at it, you know. I think that this game could totally get a remake, and they could even keep this same style, like this same low-level geometry, right? And they could just bump up the lighting in this system, and it would look great. Like, I keep thinking about this. What about if this game got a continuation, but you played as Miles, right? Like, since this game is based off of the Ultimate Universe, you would assume that it would follow the same storyline. So Peter would die, right? Miles would come and take the mantle of responsibility that is Spider-Man. And then think of the Miles Morales game, the Into the Spider-Verse skin. Like, just think of that shit. Imagine if they had a whole game like that. That shit would be so cool. Why do they not make a second one of this and make it about Miles? That shit would be so cool. I would eat that up so fast. And honestly, right now would be the time to reboot this franchise. Because with as popular as Into the Spider-Verse is, and with Across the Spider-Verse coming as well, people want more Miles stuff. Why not give people a continuation of the universe that he originally comes from and the comic book that he originally comes from? They already have the predecessor game here. It would be easy money to just create the second one with Miles. Oh, lastly, big shoutouts to the soundtrack. I've been using it as background for this video so far. But yeah, big shout outs to this music. I actually really enjoy it. It's from like the early 2000s, you can totally tell. Oh, and of course, if you want to catch these streams live, make sure that you follow me on Twitch. Because I do play all these games on Twitch, so if you want to watch them live with me and provide any commentary, just toss me a follow over there and we can chat live and all that stuff. But yeah, I guess that's all I really wanted to say about this game. I guess, like, you know, if I can convince one person to play this game who's a Spider-Man fan, and, you know, that's a win. You know what I mean? So, yeah. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you guys liked it, give it a thumbs up, smash that sub button or whatever, you know? Beat that sub button down into the ground. beat that fucking like button as many times as you can.